That inner journey is brought by the sound.
I want to ask you one question. Who is one of the most visionary directors of modern times who prioritizes sound design in their work? Of course, it's a rhetorical question because there can only be one answer: Denis Villeneuve. Between Sicario, Blade Runner and the latest Dune, we can clearly hear that the director understands the power of sound. But how does he do it, and what is so special about his approach? We start with Sicario from 2015. Subtlety is the word. So the editing team used a lot of subtle, low-end sound design ambiances to drive up the tension, like in the border scene. They also mentioned the convoy scene. So it's all about building tension through the atmosphere and subtle sounds. It's not in your face, but I can feel something will go down soon. And I'm unsure what and when. The team also talks about how each character's gunshot had a different personality, so it just shows the attention to detail that the director has. Every little element of the design is deliberate. Then, of course, the sound and music blend together, thanks to the amazing score of the late Jóhann Jóhannsson. It's all about tension building, combining everything we have, but seamlessly, rather than like, okay, here are these separate blocks, Foley, sound effects, music, now fit them together somehow. When I watch interviews with audio teams who worked with Villeneuve, it becomes clear that he's focused on the atmosphere of the films and understands that both visuals and soundscapes are crucial in building it.
He loves sound, he loves the beauty of sound, and it's a testament to his love of sound and what he did with his track that Joe Walker, the picture editor, oftentimes at this point will close his eyes and just listen to the sound of the film.
When discussing Denis Villeneuve's creative approach to sound, I have to talk about Arrival. So Arrival was a 2016 sci-fi film based on the 1998 short story Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang, whose writing I highly recommend. And sound plays a pivotal role in the film, especially in communication with the alien species. Villeneuve directed the sound team to make the heptapods holy and sacred. Because they don't communicate like humans, the vocalization was tonal and based on emotions. I can hear these super low frequencies, a combination of animal and natural sounds. And it goes back to director's preference for organic, human-like sounds, even if we're dealing with ancient alien species. And of course, the music, composed again by the late Jóhann Jóhannsson, adds to the mystery and the power of the soundscape. Again, this kind of symbiosis exists between the sound and the music. Of course, he also has more standard cinematic themes. But often the boundary vanishes and the instruments are not recognizable for what they are. Jóhannsson collaborated with many vocalists for the movie, writing the score as soon as he read the script, months before the shooting and other sounds were created.
One of the main instruments should be the voice. So I collaborated with several vocalists on the score.
Now, because he worked with the director before, I'm sure that's why he had so much freedom in writing the score. But also, it can be great practice because then the composer can send the tracks to the director when they are shooting and the team gets to feel of the scene's atmosphere, rather than using the temp tracks and then rescoring with original music, which makes the process difficult and is kind of hated by composers, especially Danny Elfman.
For me, temp music is the bane of my existence. It's my job to make the director forget everything he's heard in the temp. I won't listen to it but once. I'll never listen to it twice. And if they're addicted to it, it's just going to make my job harder.
Because it's easy to fall into cliches and sound tropes. Action scene, big rhythms and pumping drums. Sad scene, a small violin playing there. Now, there's nothing wrong with it, but when watching films like Arrival or Blade Runner 2049, we hear that sound design and music work together, often giving space to one another. But there's this line where one ends and another begins, and the line is blurred. Everything becomes a foundation of building the atmosphere and the scene together.
When I started thinking about sound with Denny, we talked about those atmospheres as being a kind of vital element. It sort of tied in with an aesthetic that we already had in place in the previous two films that we worked on. With Sicario and Arrival, we tried to reduce music to only when we really need it, and at other times to try and rely on sound effects and silence and dialogue to kind of be the music of the film.
A 2017 sequel to the original 1982 film was highly anticipated. So, it's a shame it didn't do well at the box office. Sometimes amazing projects don't make enough money. It's just life. The original Blade Runner by Ridley Scott was hugely influential. The world building, the sound and the music by Vangelis. So, how do you stay true to the first one but update it to the modern times?
I began making very brooding musical textures that would underpin almost every scene.
One direction was using pads and tonal brooding sounds created with guitars, saxophones and chimes. But the idea wasn't to have these sort of big themes, but rather, and here it comes again, focus on the atmosphere of the scene.
You look lonely. I can fix that.
Which is also what Vangelis did with his original score. Yes, there were tracks with melodies, but there were also subtle tones in the background creating the vibes, setting the mood. Denis Villeneuve said that another thing linking his Blade Runner to the original was using the same synthesizers, incorporating sound and music elements we are so familiar with.
We use the same instruments, trying to very old synthesizer called CS80 that is a beast.
Now, when I watched the behind-the-scenes YouTube video on the sound design, natural sounds are used again. So even though Blade Runner is a deep sci-fi, the team recorded around 2,500 raw sounds like tools, scrap, vehicles, environments.
We recorded a massive library of raw materials for the film.
They redesigned the blaster, they've recorded a Barrett 50 caliber sniper rifle, and that was for that small blaster pistol.
It has a round about that big and that fat, and it's got quite a kick and quite an explosion.
To make vehicles sound like they're not totally safe, they put a subwoofer inside with different metal objects so they would vibrate and rattle. So crazy creative stuff. But let's quickly talk music. Obviously, the original score by Vangelis was hugely influential, cementing the use of synthesizers in big movies. The leading composers for Blade Runner 2049 were Hans Zimmer and Benjamin Wallfisch. An interesting fact is that Jóhann Jóhannsson was the first choice. However, during the process, Villeneuve decided Jóhannsson wasn't the right fit and he wanted something closer to the original Blade Runner, so they parted ways. Wallfisch described his work as wanting to capture the spirit of Vangelis. So it has simplicity combined with unpredictability. And then we of course have Zimmer's approach in using music as an atmospheric tool which played a crucial role. So even though the score is complex, with two super talented composers working on it, they still follow the director's vision of simplicity and building the atmosphere, building the scene first, rather than going for these grand orchestral melodic parts.
I think he has a specific ear for natural, organic sounds.
Listening to Dune or even Blade Runner is not sci-fi in the sense of what Star Trek or games like Mass Effect present, because everything is rooted in the real world. It's organic, it's natural. Now, according to the sound team, Villeneuve has a blueprint, a workflow that they use, but he's not afraid of experimentation and trying new things.
Denis has a very bold approach to things, which I love. He's not afraid to take everything out.
So there is freedom, but within these structures that they build, he's selective about the sounds he wants to use in his movies. And he's also selective about the team he works with. And it's usually the same people who understand his way of working.
Very simple. Hey, Mark, we're going to make Dune. I want to get the band back together again. And I was like, yes!
And then, of course, we have Dune. Now, I'm recording this video before part 2 is out, so I will focus on the first part, released in 2021. There's an incredible behind-the-scenes video on YouTube on how they made Dune sound, but the short and sweet version was that the right approach mattered. Dune was praised for its artistic vision and the sound matched it.
Instead of trying to make a sci-fi movie, we were trying to make a documentary.
To create immersion in the world, but also keep it a bit psychedelic, a bit unnatural, yet created with organic and natural sounds.
The way to bring more, some kind of more psychedelism, if such a word exists in English, is with sound and with Hans Zimmer.
Now let's think what the most important bit of Dune is. Yes, it's sand. Walking, running, fighting, everything happens on the sand. So the team wanted to capture the right audio clips, and luckily for them, there's a lot of sand on Earth that they could record.
So I wanted to plant microphones under the ground. I wanted to run on the sand. All of the things that I was reading in the script.
They used several microphones above and below the ground to get what they wanted. And another vital aspect is sandworms, and Villeneuve wanted them to sound godlike, to be in awe of meeting these massive creatures.
We would take microphones and kind of jam them through the sand, and as if mimicking the worms' motions.
And of course, they processed it on the computers later on. Now, the sandworm's voice was so important, even though we didn't get to hear them as much in part 1, but the approach was similar to what we get in Arrival. These alien creatures, yet sounding so familiar to us, so animalistic and human. We could talk forever about the approach to the voice. How they layered many voices and whispers and created the tools to manipulate the speech.
Very powerful, strong women from the past that will be your force inside you.
The ornithopters are a blend of helicopter, jet engine and dragonfly. So again, the blend of the natural aspect with a deep sci-fi.
It's just about things flapping in the air. It needs to feel like real. It will sound close to the spirit of an helicopter. It must not sound like an helicopter, but in the same family.
The super cool and modern sound of the shield barrier and combining the melee weapons with futuristic setting.
VFX were able to hear the sound that we'd made, and make the visual effect of the shield pulsate in exactly the same rhythm.
All that shows us the director's incredible maturity and attention to sound design. He understands how important it is in storytelling. And I just want to touch on the music, which, in my view, again shows that Zimmer is ahead of the game. The blend of sound design and score is so seamless. And yes, it means that listening to it as a piece of concert music does not provide big themes like Indiana Jones or Star Wars that we can hum, that we can sing, but as a piece of storytelling and the foundation of the movie, it's incredible. When talking about the music, Zimmer wanted to experiment. He said he didn't want to use the orchestra.
We're supposed to be on a different planet, different culture. We're supposed to be in the future.
So he experimented with purpose-built instruments.
Plus, a lot of things were built. There were many journeys to the hardware store.
Or playing the conventional instruments in unconventional ways.
So I had this framework of exotic, synthesized or built instruments. I remember saying to Tina Guo, my cellist, I want your cello to sound like a Tibetan war horn.
Using vocalists, chants, choirs. The voice and language are crucial in the modern retelling of the novels.
Ultimately, all of that is just a frame for the one thing that I thought was more important than anything else in the world, which was the human voice.
The beginning of the film with Sardaukar is the perfect example. And there's a fun fact, the bagpipe sound for the House of Atreides was imitated on a guitar. But of course, then they later recorded bagpipe players as well. The music, like so many of Zimmer's scores, was made by collaboration, experimentation, and with many, many incredibly talented and skilled artists. We got the good old Hans back for part 2, so we can expect more of the same, but better and bigger. Okay, so I'm fresh from Dune 2 premiere. Yesterday I finished watching Dune 1 to prepare myself, and I just wanted to give you a sort of raw, uncut opinion after the film. And I want to start with it's more intimate. I think it's more mystical, a little bit slower at the beginning, but it is different than part 1. But when talking about sound, of course, like in this video, Denis Villeneuve shows again his audio-centric director. And there's a lot of storytelling done by sound and sound only, not just with the dialogue, and by contrast of sound. So we have this big sort of guttural, deep sound design, and then contrasted with silence or some soft design. And of course, Hans Zimmer, the composer, plays into it. There's a very good interview, I'll link it up, when he talks, again, he steps out of the comfort zone. He's not looking for the tunes, but rather for the sonic landscape, for the textures of the planet, of the sound. And there's this blend of sound design and music that it works really, really well. So I highly recommend it. Again, it's not for everyone, right? You need to like this kind of genre, the hard, deep sci-fi, but it's as good, if not better, than part 1. Thumbs up. Alright, why did I want to make this video? Like, what's the point? Well, I have 2, actually. One is the appreciation of the director, of course. Denis Villeneuve is one of Canada's most renowned and highly regarded filmmakers. His movies are visually creative, atmospheric and thought-provoking, and have garnered critical acclaim and achieved substantial commercial success too. Besides, people say Denis is a good guy, and they love working with him. But the second is a general attitude to sound production and post-production. I worked at the movie studio before. My day job now is audio producing and composing in storytelling podcasts. I have friends working in sound on video games. And usually sound is an overlooked part of the budget and the deadline. Everyone's focused on pre-production, the story, the scripts, the look, then the production. Could be filming, could be coding, could be recording, the sexy stuff. But very little thought is often given to the soundscape as a part of the narrative. Music gets a bit of the attention, yes, but still not as much as it should. Yet, sound is so crucial. It's how we communicate. It's 50% of how we perceive the world. It should be more celebrated, it should be acknowledged. But it is known as a hidden art, as invisible art, meaning it's only noticed when there's something wrong with it. And Denis Villeneuve is one of a few prominent directors that understand that. He strongly emphasizes music and sound, and his non-traditional approach is inspiring. His blend of natural and unnatural and his use of atmospheric soundscape is incredible. and his movies should be watched and listened to on an even basis. So that is why I made this video, because I want to shine a light on the incredible work of the best in the game. So not just the people we see on the screen get all the praise, but the teams behind them are also celebrated. Thanks for watching.